Kate Falter, welcome to Irish Granny Tarot. It's time for our Saturday book, and I'm sure everybody is going to be very happy to see that we are going to do the Convoluted Universe, book number 4 by Dolores Cannon. This is video number 1. Dolores Cannon, back by popular demand. Her books are always very well received here and always really interesting. Let me read you a little bit about the contents of this book from the back of it. So she wanted to open up new ways of looking at our world and our reality. And so some of the topics, ongoing information about the spirit side of things, where we go when we die, life reviews, preparing contracts, your life plan of what you hope to accomplish when you reincarnate, living all of your lives. This is interesting. Past, present, and future simultaneously. The simultaneous occurrence of time, not linear. A lot of stuff in here about DNA, changing your DNA, the role of certain illnesses in raising collective consciousness, the diminishing veil between other dimensions that lets us see, like now in our time period, this veil is lifting, and I think we all feel it. The activation of a new powerful energy to be used in this time of transformation. The reuniting of all the fragments of the soul. This was something that I found very interesting. And a whole lot more stuff. So just a very quick introduction. If you have not watched the other videos that I've made about books 1, 2, and 3, this can be watched by itself. You don't have to watch them. The information she gives somewhat overlaps and builds on itself, but it's all fascinating. So this can be watched sort of in isolation as its own entity, but it's part of a larger series, and it's really very interesting series. So I would recommend stay here and watch this and go back and watch from the very beginning. And I don't remember how long ago it's been since we did her first book. If you go on my Irish Granny channel on YouTube and you hit the little button that says videos, it presents all the videos in chronological order, starting with today, the most recent. You scroll and scroll and scroll, and you'll eventually find it. I should put them on a special playlist, and if I can remember long enough to get around to doing it, I will. Okay, so it's been a while since I've read this, so bear with me when I try to decipher my hieroglyphics here. So Dolores Cannon's sessions began to evolve from hypnotherapy to regression to experiences with ETs to metaphysics. If you're not familiar with her body of work, she was a hypnotherapist who was working with her husband in like the 70s to help people stop smoking, or help people stop biting their nails, or help people deal with phobias, fear of spiders, and things like that. And every once in a while, she would put people under, and suddenly these people who tended to be somnambulant and better able to tune into where the level they needed to tune into, they would start remembering stories of the past, and she quickly realized they were re-experiencing their past lives. They were regressing into their past lives. She developed a special technique of hypnotherapy that best accessed that subconscious part of them. And her work was dedicated to teaching that technique and taking clients through to their past lives to help with healing and understanding in their present life. Often she would find somebody who had intractable pain. Oh yeah, my knee never stops hurting. Well, you take them back to a past life when there was an injury. Or somebody who had a phobia. Turns out it was related to maybe some traumatic event in a past life. Relationships. It helped to clarify some relationships with people because, we travel in packs, we souls, and interact with each other over multiple lifetimes. and it helps to have a little insight. So she wrote these books to make people think, and each one in the series gets a little stranger according to canon, and they do build on each other. So she will have received information from Joe about a situation, and 10 years later she'll get more detail about that from Mary. I made the names up in case you can't tell. So let's start with part 1, Beyond the Veil. Chapter 1, My Own Past Lives. Hers, not mine. Dolores Cannon's. So she did get regressions of herself more than 40 years ago. And I should tell you when this book was written. And it's important to remember, okay, the book itself was written in 2000, and that was the reprint. So around 2013-ish. And it had been reprinted a number of times, which is why it's a little difficult to tell. However, many of these sessions occurred decades earlier. So she did get regressions for herself more than 40 years ago from the time this book was written. And from those sessions, she learned what not to do with her clients. And she developed her own technique. She found out about 8 of her own past lives and discovered relationships with family today were repeated, and discovered why she was doing the work she was doing. And it was a valuable tool, but she found out that she didn't really need to revisit past lives anymore, that it was time to look forward instead of backwards for her. She said she didn't want to become a past life junkie. And she said all of us are supposed to learn things in this life by dealing with this life. But then again, it can be very healing if you have issues or phobias or real big problems and you really need help and nothing else seems to have helped. This might be a tool you could consider because it has helped heal people. So a friend regressed her, and she has always loved books and libraries. And in the trance that she was put into, she found herself back in the library at Alexandria. And she says, as an aside, when she was a child and even as an adult, she loved to copy the dictionary, and discovered in one of these regressions she'd been a monk. And that's what monks did. They copied things to make books. All books were made by hand. And in this life, she spent a lot of time researching her books exhaustively, and she really got pleasure from that. In this past life, she was a man in a library. She did not know how to read, but she knew which books, as this man, knew which books were the most precious and oldest, and they were able to figure out that probably in that life she had been a caretaker of the library. And this man, Dolores Cannon, was in the library when a horde of, invaders invaded and set fire to it. And he managed to escape with some scrolls and got run over by a chariot. Oh, well. So in 1990, Cannon went to Bulgaria to do a speech, to do a presentation, because she had a new publisher who was translating her books into Bulgarian. And then the war in Yugoslavia broke out. God, talk about bad timing. But she said it was one of the best experiences of her life because she was like a rock star when she went to Bulgaria because of her Nostradamus book. She said the people just went insane. The crowds just were so happy to see her. And she was approached by a Russian documentarian who wanted to film one of her doing a regression. And her publisher, Drago, who was his name, volunteered to be the subject. And Cannon said she was really kind of worried it wouldn't work. just because he, wasn't necessarily the ideal client, he was sort of doing it under duress, basically. Usually people came to her and begged her to do it, and he was like, well, all right. So Drago was taken back to a life as a scholar and a teacher of astronomy and numerology who spent a lot of time at the library at Alexandria, as they had known each other before, and died running out of a fire with scrolls. So he later, this is an overlap, and he later told Cannon that he'd always had pain in his shoulder, and they found from this past life regression that he died when the library roof burnt and a beam fell on him and hit him in that area. She received an award on television, Bulgarian television, while she was there for the research she'd done in psychic phenomenon, and she was the first American to receive this prestigious award. People were very open to this in Bulgaria. Drago later told her that her technique had become very popular in Bulgaria, and it was now being taught and used quite extensively. In another past life, Cannon found herself at the Parthenon in Athens, where she was a woman in a large house with servants and a husband and children. She found herself running away from being chased through the streets, and she ran to a temple on a hill with a view of a harbor full of ships. And she was praying for help at the temple, but she was killed by a soldier with a sword. And what happened is that she had been too outspoken for her husband, and he ordered her death. And because she felt betrayed, because the goddess didn't save her, and she carried that sense of betrayal into this life, and she said today, Dolores Cannon died in 2014, but while she was writing this book, she said, today, I absolutely hate organized religion, and I can directly associate it with this sense of betrayal by the goddess. So, interestingly, in this life, she happened to go to Greece and realize that she had regressed to the Temple of Athena. She recognized it in her visit, and she recognized the view of the harbor with the boats. Slowly, her sessions included an energy entity that gave her information and helped with healings. And she called this the subconscious, that contained all knowledge and of everything about everybody, sort of tapping into the records. And this was sessions that she did with other people. She began to realize she was tapping into their subconscious. So Chapter 2, the evolution of consciousness. As time went on, she kept thinking she had heard everything. I've heard it all. And she had a belief system. And then it would be challenged. And she'd readjust her belief system. First, that you could hypnotize somebody. That was a new concept. Then she got used to that. This is possible. Legitimate, and then that you can regress somebody to a past life, and it took her a while to be accepting of that. And then she realized that there was a technique that tapped even farther, and then she realized that some people were capable of transmitting information from other entities in other planes through the hypnotic sessions they were put under to Dolores Cannon, that there were messages for her coming, and she kept having to readjust her assumptions about a lot of things. So one of these things that she had to rethink was the idea of imprints. And she says that she was fed manageable amounts of all of this in baby steps so that she could process it, digest it, understand it, and then she was ready for more. Every time she thought she was done, she'd find out something new. So the veil is getting thinner, and our consciousness is expanding. And you can really see this in a growing interest in metaphysics. And our old paradigm is falling away because the entire planet's vibration is changing, the level of vibration. And this is already happening. This is not something that's going to happen when somebody comes out of the clouds in a chariot or something, like, old biblical stories, the expectation of the book of Revelation. This is a process, and it's already happening. So what she has done, she says in her books, is to collect all this stuff and let it build until she has enough cohesive information that's related to each other to make a book. She puts it in some kind of sense of order, and there we go. So these are some of the things that she was able to put together. We come from source, whatever you want to label that. We've been sent here to learn, or we've come here to learn and to gain experience. The earth is the most difficult place to do that. It's the most difficult school. And too late, no turning back. We signed up for it. Only the braver souls come to earth. People willing to really go there and face the hard work. And we're admired by the spirit world because we've chosen the hardest course. But you have to complete each lesson before you can move ahead. So if you come here for a purpose and you spend your whole time watching the Kardashians on television and eating microwave popcorn, you're going to have to come back and do it again. So it behooves us to work on this. But we have all eternity, so, that's kind of probably a special kind of hell, right? A lifetime, an eternity of Kardashians. Think about that. This is not in the book. I'm just kidding around. We have an eternity to accomplish what we need to learn, and in order to be finished with our experiences on Earth, we have to experience everything. And we will come here as spirit and start in the simplest form as air, as a gas, as water, as cells, as dirt, as rocks. And you don't regress. You don't finally become a human and then all of a sudden you're a molecule again in your next life. It doesn't work that way because your lessons are building and you need the capacity to grow those lessons. But the point that she needed to accept early sessions was that everything has consciousness and energy. So dirt, rocks, etc. And we accumulate all these lessons over lifetimes and we evolve our souls. And we're all part of a oneness of nature, one consciousness. And nature is a group spirit. So you see things like flocks and herds and swarms and hives, and they are individuals but part of a larger consciousness in a group. To progress, you have to separate your soul from that group with love. And so we start out simple with this group thing going on. Part of a school of fish, like that. And then you reincarnate, and you evolve from that state of group consciousness by love. And love is the only real thing. So, loving a pet, I thought this was really interesting. If you have a pet and you love that pet and you teach it well, you're teaching it to develop and to separate from the group, from the pack, and you're helping the pet's soul to progress. Animals have souls, but their souls are not as evolved as souls in humans, and they will. And we can help that, or we can hinder it by our mistreatment of them. There's no such thing as a valuable lesson that's easy or fast. They're tough. And we have to experience all human life forms, genders, states of living, to be balanced. So you have to be rich and you have to be poor. I'm still waiting for the rich. You have to be rich, you have to be poor. You have to be sick, you have to be well. Male, female, both. You have to be everything over time. Every hair color, size, shape, etc. So some people might feel like they reincarnate into their present life and really totally identify with who they are here and now. And some people carry lingering karma from a past life, or the lesson that they need to learn includes an uncertainty about their status, their appearance, their gender, their abilities. It's either karma you've brought forward or it's the new lesson that you need to learn. And so you are what you are, and the trick is, what can you learn from that? And every race, every religion, every continent, both sides of every situation. So think of all the times that you need to reincarnate to learn all that stuff. The main lesson of reincarnation, I hate to read this because, oh my God, this is the hardest lesson for me. The main lesson of reincarnation is to not judge. And then the other one is not to have prejudice, which is prejudging. So they're related. You have to repeat everything until your karma is balanced. And we're not talking about reward and punishment. We're talking about learning all of the sides of a situation. So some people repeat it because they're just not getting the point. You know, they got to do it over and over until they get the point, which was why I said it behooves us to make the effort to learn. So there are volunteers that are here on Earth to help those who don't have or don't have karma, or to create karma. No, wait, I said that wrong. There are volunteers here to help us. The volunteers don't have or create karma. So what the point is, that there are spirits who volunteer to come, and they are independent of the system of karma. Sometimes I do my shorthand a little too short. They're like guest teachers. They're on a special assignment. They don't really like it here. They don't really want to be here. It's difficult to be here. But their job is to stay here until their job is done. And if they don't do that, then they might accumulate karma. So because of free will, any spirit volunteer who comes to help us cannot change us, but can teach us, and it's subtle. They can't force us to make different choices, but they can make choices available and obvious and sort of present the lessons for us. There are some special souls who finished here on Earth, did what they had to do, and they volunteered to return to help. Bodhisattvas, Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, they came when people were particularly stuck as a whole to show love. And they often met with violence because their ideas were radical in the time that they came. So the next part of this book, this chapter, is the role of HIV/AIDS in raising consciousness. And I'm going to be being a little cautious here. I don't want to get in trouble, with YouTube. She starts this section of the chapter out by saying that actually more souls volunteer to come here in unwell bodies or in some form of handicapped bodies with disabilities of some sort, because those teach lessons that are so profound that they're 10 times better at addressing karma than a healthy, functioning human body would be. not only does the person who has the issue, whatever physical issue it is, learn from that, people around them also learn. It's very valuable in a karmic sense. And in history, there have been a lot of diseases that cause fear and stigma. For example, leprosy. For example, tuberculosis. For example, HIV. So she did a session with a guy called Michael. And he had HIV. His T cells were extremely low, and that means your body's immunological system is really impaired in fighting infections. And when your body is at a certain low level, then it becomes the AIDS, full-blown AIDS. And she said some interesting things. Now, I'm not giving medical advice. I'm not making scientific statements here. I'm repeating what spirits told Dolores Cannon. She was told that T cells from the thymus in the throat, it's about not speaking the truth. I don't know exactly what that means. So this session with this man began with him as being water. He wanted aloneness to get away from the chaos that he had been in, but now he was ready to move on and to learn. So in his next life, he was in a field in the Old West. He was a very poor old woman. Very poor woman pregnant in a dilapidated shack. It was very hot. They did not have enough water. She had to walk 2 hours for supplies, and she didn't have any money, so what did she trade, right? And she didn't have a husband. Now she had a baby, so this was a socially difficult situation for her to be in. Oh, she did have a husband, but for some reason, I don't remember why, this wasn't the husband's baby. Well, she was trading herself for sexual favors in order to afford food. But I don't understand how in those days they knew. She may not have mentioned. Nowadays you do a paternity test, but for some reason, maybe her husband had been away. I guess that must be it. So Cannon moved Michael through the session into a later date of the same life, and men are telling the husband that his wife is pregnant, and then he beats her and she dies. And what ends up happening, this is really interesting, the husband starves to death. So that was a difficult life. Michael moves to another day, he saw this life that he was in, this really difficult life as this pioneerish woman. The lesson for him was to learn acceptance without shame. So after he had these sessions, people told him that he seemed to have a different energy about him and were really teaching them a lesson in judgment. He had HIV, and at that time, he had been told people who had it were advanced souls who volunteered to help with the lessons of judgment and prejudice because of the social stigma at the beginning of HIV. So this session began a huge elevation in his T cells, and Cannon told him, well, your lesson was learned. You needed to speak the truth, and in order to speak the truth, which would elevate your T cells, you needed to experience these past lives and understand fundamentally about judgment. When you brought that lesson forward into your present life, your immunological system improved. And that's very interesting because that's a measurable change. And nobody, they couldn't explain it. Cannon thought she could. So chapter 3, the spirit side. So she'd been receiving information about spirit since 1968. And I thought she started in the 70s. I guess she started in the late 60s. And it really challenged her belief system at first. So she lives in Arkansas, she's still getting information which doesn't contradict what she's heard before, but it broadens it. And the information she gets also from around the globe is very consistent. She's been told many, many times that death is easy. It's a feeling of release, a lightness, and relief, and being glad to not be trapped in a body anymore. And the person who dies is usually met by a greeter, which may or may not be known to you when you die, but you're never alone unless you're such an advanced soul that you know exactly what's going on. So I feel like I can not count myself in that group. She also said that she was told that these spirits that greet you when you die are also around you in life too. And you can go to one of any number of different places. It depends on where your vibratory level is and where you're compatible, where your frequency is compatible. So if you've learned on Earth, it's going to be a higher level than it was the last time that you were out of body. And if your death is traumatic, your soul may be taken to what she referred to as a resting place. It's quiet, and you stay there until you're ready to re-enter the wheel of karma. So if there's a horrible trauma that happens to you, that's such a shock out of the blue, it's kind of a moment of pause. So you gather your resources and then move on. You go before a council to evaluate your life. Your life review is not a judgment. It's to decide what lessons you did learn and what you still need to do, what's going to come next. You judge yourself and you decide what you want to learn and what you need to rectify. You might feel remorse, like, darn, I didn't get that right, but it's not a painful thing. Then you prepare with other souls. You make a plan. You're in a soul family, so you gather and you decide, okay, this time I'll be your brother. Last time you were my uncle, that kind of thing. And life is like a play, and you have complete control of the script at any time. I thought that was interesting. Once you incarnate, it is no longer so clear or easy, and everyone has free will. Everyone has his or her own agenda, and often the souls you got along with so great between lives, all of a sudden, your agendas don't mesh properly. So the veil comes down when you incarnate, and you forget your past, you forget your origins, and everything gets harder. So you have to learn, there's a reason for that. You have to learn your lessons on your own. If you have the answer key to the test, what's the point of taking the test? So bad lives, she says, she's heard a lot of horrors about people's inhumanity to each other. And people will ask, why me? Why did I go through that? Or why did I do that? And Canon's learned that we choose it. We agree to the major events in our lives as the lessons we need to learn. But our choices all depend on free will. So you have a blueprint, you have an outline, but the details are determined by your decisions, by your free will. We've got eternity, and we'll repeat it until we get it right. And this is what our souls want to do, is to learn these lessons. So, for example, she had a subject who was a woman who was born into a drug and a crime abuse family. So a lot of criminal behavior going on. And at an early age, she learned to sort of build a psychic wall around her to protect herself. And she got out of the situation as early as she could, and she never looked back. She decided very young to choose the light. She learned the lessons that the painful childhood were intended to teach. Some are born into abuse to learn self-reliance and survival, and they chose this lesson. So rethink how you look at life's really hard challenges because there's a purpose. What did you or what can you learn? You should ask yourself. Now this next part's weird. I mean, I'm just saying, don't judge, right? Chapter 4, Life as Other Creatures. So the first one is the sea creature. And she said there were numerous examples in her sessions that were really weird for people. But she says to remember that we have to experience life in every form. One woman was a manta ray egg inside a manta ray inside a cave. And as a manta, her egg hatched. She learned group cooperation. She learned to help those who are not where she is in evolution, to relate to their level. And then Cannon talked about the body healing itself, that our spirit world is around us at all times. All we have to do is ask, which seems like not related at all to the manta ray, and it isn't, because sometimes in these stories she'll kind of veer off suddenly and make a random comment out of context. But there you go. So then she talks about life as an ant, A-N-T. So everything has consciousness, and this subject realized that he was part of a colony living in a nest, in a log, a tree. And the lesson, they were working individually, but they were working for the group. And they would forage and return with food, and he died and has a life review. And what that life taught was family togetherness and cooperation. And he realized that he had decided that in his next incarnation, he was going to learn about love, freedom, and patience. His lesson, or his purpose in that life, was to help others, to learn how to see a need for others and to help fulfill it. So he was given advice, and Cannon said this advice is really for all of us to meditate. Meditating makes it easier to communicate with your guides because it raises your vibration. And here's the advice nobody wants to hear: exercise. Next, we have the big bird, and Rachel, her subject Rachel, went into trance and found herself to be a bird. And when she died, her lesson, what was the point of that? Her lesson was that all life has a purpose. Don't be afraid to be alone. Love is always there with you. You are never alone. And she needed to learn to trust herself and not wait around. She had to make things happen for herself. Be kind to herself without judgment, to be patient with herself, and to enjoy life. Then there was a person who in trance was an elemental spirit. This subject found herself as literally a fairy being, an elemental part of the spirit world. So we sometimes see them as fireflies. I've actually never seen a firefly. I've never lived anywhere where they existed. So she was part human and on a mission to spread light at a troubled time, to uplift spirits and spread hope. And it seems like such a simple, little, unimportant thing, but there was a purpose to it. In a past life, she lived in, now this is a long time ago, and then moving forward, but still a past life, she lived in Egypt as a half-human, half-star person with a big job to help the fate of the world. She said that she had people that she regressed who, I wanted to say revoke, not the right word, regressed, who had life as just simple people in a village. And Cannon was sort of freaked out because she was describing, this woman was describing rats. And the woman in this particular session who was in a village with rats said that lots of fear was in the air. And at night, her job was to clear that fear away. And in the regressive sessions, this woman who had been a firefly, been an elemental spirit, a fairy, who brought these little bits of light in different ways and was part of light beings herself. Between lives, she returned to her home of origin, and she was a light being and was young and learning. And so these were little missions they sent her out on. And once again, Canon reminds us we have a lot of free will, but we also have a lot of responsibility to make the right choices. So chapter 5 is called Many Choices. She regressed a subject named Patty and tried to discover what had she learned from 2 past lives. She had learned that her life was easy in one, like a vacation, and she realized, oh, okay, well, that was actually intentional. It was a chance to rest. But then her next life was hard. There were lots of confrontations and friction. And the lesson here was that after you die, you have to decide what's next. And this woman, Patty, described a wise counsel who showed her the possibilities and helped her to make the right decision. She could have gone into the military, or she could have gone into academics, or she could have gone into remote labor. And so she chose the remote labor, and will have to experience all of these things eventually in other incarnations, but the order is dependent on her choice. So you get to choose when and where and what and how, and then of a life, and then actually within the life you make a lot of choices too. So there's always free will at play is the important thing. So Canon said she often helps to guide people to self-healing, but they have to do the work. It's not enough to go under hypnosis and then you're all better. No, you have to do the work. And you can't blame outside causes for your internal situation. You have to accept why you have issues and heal from within. Just being kind of vague here, but we'll get into it. She says we sometimes, I would say always, forget we agreed to this life. And she said even Jesus, who was a great healer, was not able to heal an illness that had been caused by karma. It's up to the person. That's up to the one who's a sufferer. It's our own personal responsibility to do something about that. So that was a short chapter. Chapter 6 is called The Planning Stage. So she had a subject named Amber who went into trance and said, I'm a boy and Spaniards are questioning us. They're looking for something and I can't understand them, the language. She said, I can't understand them, but I think they're looking for gold. She said everybody around her, around this boy, was scared and trying to hide from the Spaniards, and some got killed. She said, I volunteered to take them. I didn't know where, to trick them. I'll take them away, promising them I'm going to show them gold, and I'll just get them away from the other people so that they can escape. So as a boy, he says, I see my mother and her eyes give me strength. She knows strength to do what I have to do. So I take the Spaniards far. I lead them far, over a day away from our village. I backtrack and I confuse them, and I'm trying to buy time for my people to escape and hide. I lead them to a cave in a box canyon, and I hope to escape, but they make me go in with them, and they're mad because there's no gold, and they kill him. They go back to the village and they kill the slow people. His soul tries to help the villagers, but eventually he moves on to a place of light, temples of light, places of learning. There's an old man there who explains things to him. He says the place feels very familiar. So now we're not looking at a past life. We're looking at between lives. He says there's lots of books, and you get to know what's inside the books just by touching them. People get their own room with their own books. He's very excited about that. And the books are to help them to plan their next life. He said you can just call the books and they appear. And opening it, he said, it's like looking at life. It's not words, it's visible. So I guess the best thing we could compare it to would be like a video on a device of some sort. And the lesson of the life that he had before as a villager was the importance of family and friends. And also that you can't save everyone. He was taken to a garden to rest in nature and to learn to live in the moment. And then he was taken to his group of souls who had lived many lives together. And even while on earth, part of us stays on the spirit side. Now, this is a concept that was new to me. Your soul exists in multiple places at the same time. You're here, but your soul's also learning things elsewhere. That's a hard one to wrap your brain around. His soul group will probably reincarnate in the Middle East next to be on opposite sides. Oh God. And the goal here is to teach everybody, themselves and other people, that people are more alike than different. It's a very timely little message from Dolores Cannon right now, isn't it? So he returned to spirit, and while planning, he noticed that some spirits look dimmer than others because they're actually already incarnated, and he is just seeing part of their spirit. People do this while they're sleeping too. Their soul goes off to learn and to interact with other souls. And he said, life is not about perfection. No one's going to be perfect. It's about learning. So this next chapter is called A Short Life. A person called Kim, somebody in her 60s, who's a retired airline attendant, in trance discovers she's a girl who's 15 in a small town near the ocean. She lived in a 3-story building with a feed store on the first floor. She has a mother, a father, and 3 brothers. It's the late 1800s, possibly the early 1900s. This is the family business. Everybody helped. They lived a very tranquil life until she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. She died, and she said that she watched the whole thing unfold from across the room. And she felt herself going to the light and felt peace. She was told she couldn't go back. She said, she was told you chose this death so young and so quickly. That was the lesson. This is your time. Your soul intended this lesson. If your body breaks too young, your soul doesn't grow. But in this particular case, she chose this for some other reason. So this is a lesson for the rest of us. Appreciate growing older and try to take care of yourself. And then the other message was try not to fall. I thought that was kind of funny. But I always say, when people go, oh God, I didn't know you were that old, and they're trying to be nice. I'll say, yeah, but it's better than the alternative. And it really is, because the older you get, the more opportunity you have to work on yourself. So she's told that she has to exist in the light for a while before moving on and before making plans for her next life and her next lessons. The people in her life were souls in various relationships with her in the past, and her people today, as Kim in this session with Canon, she's told that these same souls are back in her life today. And she came because she had ringing in her ears, and she was told the ringing in her ears was from the changing and the vibrations of the earth. Just she's more sensitive, and she said if meditate to elevate your vibration might help some of the symptoms you have. Next, we have a woman named Wilma, and she regresses to a situation where she's in a car underwater. The car went off the bridge and she can't breathe. She's only 7 years old. She's with her mother and her sister, and they all died. She sees her father, who already had died, and he was waiting for her, and she sees her aunt. And she was told, you died young because you learned already everything you need to learn. She says, this all feels very familiar. Going through it again, it's like a filmy fog. She says, I'm going to a school to figure out what to do next. It's ridiculous how, from the spirit side, everything seems obvious. And as soon as you incarnate on earth, we're so blind. We don't remember anything. She says, it's pitiful. On earth, we don't consciously remember, but our plan is recorded and it's in our soul and we access it in spirit. We just know spirit beings try to help us to keep on track, and they can't interfere with our free will, but they can create roadblocks to help steer us in the right direction. But interestingly, she drowned, in that last life, and in this life she has lung issues. So I thought it was interesting. Chapter 8, a difficult assignment. A subject named Mary in trance is 6-year-old, a girl on a farm from a very difficult family. She's afraid of her father's anger. She loves animals. Canon realized that Mary was reliving this lifetime again. Took her back right before that incarnation, and her soul was resisting even going into being this 6-year-old girl that she describes. And she's told that she needs to learn relationships and thought processes and staying clear of negativity, and it would be healing for the family for her to be in that life, and that's why she went there. She was told to do no harm, and her goal was perfection, which is silly because it's impossible. So there are many planes, many planets, many choices. And once again, she says, Earth is really stupid because we don't remember anything about our past lives. She was told that there will be a quantum leap forward and she needs to be on Earth right now, that a lot of souls are actually coming here to Earth for the first time on a mission to help with this quantum leap in energy. The human brain is in its infancy. It's not all hooked up yet. We know that. Junk DNA, right? We know that. We need to reorient the Earth to the way it should be. She's told she'll be helped, that she doesn't have to be stuck in 3-dimension gravitational stuff, that it's going to change, that the Earth will change, and eventually you won't even need a body. That we're going to reclaim skills. We used to have skills like teleporting, and that these souls coming in to help will be energy facilitators during and after this shift in energy. And some people will stay on a higher earth energy and some people will leave, and it's never clear to me in these books who's who. Is it simultaneous? Do we recognize each other? It's never clear. We're all supposed to work together to end negativity and make life lighter and raise the vibes, basically. And then Mary's subconscious tells Canon that we don't really need to revert to past lives, and to look at past lives, that we're done with the past. If you want to do it just for the heck of it, or to try to heal something, okay. But like she said, past life junkies are totally becoming obsessed with looking at what your past lives are. Instead, focus on the here and now, what you can do now. And I think just a personal observation, because I've gone obsessively through these books now, and like I said, I have a very difficult time sussing out this whole concept of a new earth and an old earth and a different vibration and a different plane and a paradigm shift. And it's not clear And I think it's intentionally not clear. I don't think we're going to realize. Some of us are going to feel changes in energy, but I don't think there's going to be that pivotal moment where we all go, boom, it's changed. I'm not clear that's what's going to happen. I think we're just going to go about our daily lives and be faced with what we're faced with. And to me, the lesson there is what we're supposed to be focusing on is our interaction with people today, in the here and now. And if we don't worry about the past, and we don't obsess with that, and we don't worry and fear the future, just focus on today. So, I don't know. That's what I got out of it. It's not in the book, and I probably shouldn't editorialize, but there we go. So this is the end of that chapter, and I'm going to end video number 1 here because this is a good place to stop. And I'll be back with video number 2 here in a second. And thanks for watching Slongerfoil.